Hello, I'm Ann Del Castillo, Commissioner of the New York City Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the 2021 Industry Forum at the New York International Children's Film Festival. We at the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment are proud to be a founding partner of this important event. Our agency is charged with supporting New York City's creative economy: film, television, theater, music, advertising, publishing, digital content, and nightlife. Our Office of Film, Theater, and Broadcasting provides support for on-location filming throughout New York City. NYC Media operates the largest municipal broadcast television and radio network in the country, and our Office of Nightlife works to support a thriving nighttime industry which has given birth to so many of our most influential cultural movements. Through our programs and initiatives, we support industry and workforce development in order to ensure access and opportunities for a diverse talent pool. Together, these sectors represent over $150 billion in economic output annually and over 500,000 jobs for New Yorkers. But more than that, they define New York City as a global creative capital. As someone who started at Sesame Street, children's programming is particularly important to me. But also, as an only child of a single immigrant mother, I experienced the power of children's media. My mother likes to joke that Sesame Street was my babysitter, but really what was important was that I saw my experience as an urban American of immigrant heritage reflected in programs like Sesame Street, Mr. Rogers, and Electric Company. So I thank the New York International Children's Film Festival for their vision and commitment in presenting this forum. And I thank all of you for being here and engaging in these important conversations. So with that, I now turn it over so that you can begin our program.
Hey, everyone. Welcome. Happy Thursday. My name is Maria Cristina Villaseñor. I'm the programming director of the New York International Children's Film Festival. I'm so happy that you all can join us. It looks like from all across the country, we have an amazing group of folks tuning in and an amazing group of participants for this, our second panel in this industry forum series toward an inclusive future. And this evening's panel is going to be fantastic. It is owning your story and focusing on BIPOC creators and the stories that they shape from inception on through to production and getting them out in the world. So I think it's going to be I know it's going to be a really amazing conversation in terms of thinking about storytelling, working with integrity to realize your vision, and just, really coming together as a community to make sure that we make this field more inclusive and welcome new generations into it and learn from those that are doing amazing work out there. So I'm going to go through some thank yous first before I introduce our amazing panelists. As part of our nonprofit mission at NYICFF, as I said, our goal is to advocate for more intelligent, more diverse film culture for kids, as vital arts engagement, as a path toward understanding, and also as a way for kids to understand the world and themselves and their different identities as they come into their own. So we felt it was important to launch the industry forum to really ensure that that happens. That's only going to really work if we actively ensure that it is a more inclusive field of storytellers and folks in all parts of the industry out there. And we broadly define the industry to be anything from major studio to an independent director working on their stop motion film or their live action. It's really important to us to support the integrity of the work, regardless of where it comes from and where it lands, and to make sure that we curate these programs and share them for both kid audiences, but also serving all of you as you range through your careers and your studies and your trajectories in this media arts field that really is so important for young folks and for all of us to be inspired and thoughtful. So just getting back to the thank yous, I want to thank, as you heard from the Commissioner for the Mayor's Office for Media Entertainment, the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment has been a wonderful founding partner on this forum, which was inaugurated last year. So thank you for coming back again and offering that support. And also to Unifrance for their support of the series. Panels take place every Thursday through May 27th. So be sure you come back for the next 3. And next week's is going to be really amazing as well. It's Beyond Binary and Kids Storytelling. So do sign up for that if you haven't already. As you see, we've got an active chat going. We invite you to, share your thoughts throughout. Later on, when we get to the Q&A section, you can share your questions through our Q&A little function down there for our panelists, and I will make sure to relay them to them. And also, I think we dropped in the chat a Google Sheet. So it's an openly shared Google Sheet, so just be aware of that. If you're sharing anything, it is public, but we invite you to, connect with each other, share your portfolios or your CVs, share whatever you want, and we really want to make this an inclusive community. So as I said, we're focusing on owning your story. What does it take to bring diverse storytelling to the screen and see that your creative ideas, your characters and storylines are brought to audiences with depth, integrity, and in alignment with your vision as a BIPOC creator, as a creator wanting to bring your stories or facilitate those of others to the screen. So we're excited to hear from these amazing creators and tell us about their journeys. So let's go ahead and introduce them. And we have we have a little slideshow to just give you a sense of their visual work if you don't know it already. And also in the resources in the contact sheet, there will also be links to their work. So you can check out things that you might not yet know. All right, so first up is Frank Abney. Frank Abney is the director of the acclaimed Netflix short film Canvas. Such a beautiful film. Frank is also now working on an original feature project, which we're excited to maybe hear something about. And along with his impressive animation career, he's also the co-founder of the advocacy and mentoring group Rise Up Animation. So welcome, Frank.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
It's so great to have you. And there you see that gorgeous work, and we can't wait to hear more about it. All right, next up is Halima Lucas. And Halima is the director of the acclaimed short film, Amelia's Closet. Amelia's Closet was showcased as part of NYICFF's Film Ed Classroom, which brings short films to the screen. And you see her there in one of the production shots on that work. And she is, Amelia's Closet, I should say, was showcased by HBO at the time prior to our screening. It was an award winner in our festival. She's working now at Disney TV Animation on the series Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur, and she's also developing new projects. So welcome, Halima. Hey, Halima.
Hi, thank you.
So great to see you again. All right, and next we have Elizabeth Ito, creator and showrunner of the new hit, highly acclaimed Netflix series City of Ghosts, and director of the award-winning short Welcome to My Life, which was also featured at NYICFF, an award winner, did extremely well around festivals around the world, and featured in NYICFF's Film Ed Classroom. Hey, Elizabeth.
Hi guys, thanks for having me.
It's so great to have you back, and excited to talk about the relationship between these two works and your whole career. All right, and last but certainly not least, we have Miguel Buga, the showrunner of Nickelodeon's celebrated series, The Casagrandes. Prior to The Casagrandes, Miguel worked on The Loud House, which of course makes sense, you know, The Casagrandes, and has extensive animation experience on a whole host of shows, and we're excited to hear about his story developing this and his trajectory. So Miguel, welcome.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me.
It's so great. And we have this nice meeting of the East Coast and West Coast too. All this crew, you're all out West, right? And Frank, but Frank, are you in NorCal?
No, I'm from NorCal. I'm from the
Ah,
Bay Area, but I'm in LA now though.
all right, so everybody's representing
Yeah.
SoCal. We're
I know
gonna,
Halima, you're from the Bay Area too, right?
Not quite Stockton, just inland, but yeah,
Yeah,
we're
you're
hops to
in the
the
realm. Yeah.
that counts. And I think we have a Boyle Heights connection down there, don't we, Elizabeth? Mika?
We're nearby. Yeah.
Nice to
Yes.
have connectors. So Brooklyn here, but former East Bay. So yeah, nice to have the East and West meet and have all of our audience in between and everywhere else. So, I think it's going to be a really amazing and natural kind of shared space, and I want to encourage that and definitely want to give space to the audience. You all had some great questions in the previous panel. I know you will today as well, but let's just start out and start with you, Frank. Tell us a little bit about your impressive career path, because I think it's really interesting to think about these major studios that you work with and the kind of projects that you work with, and then take a look at this really sort of beautiful, intimate storytelling style through canvas, and tell us a little bit about how that all happened.
Yeah. So I mean, I wanted to get into film since I was a kid. I didn't know, initially I wanted to be an animator, but The Lion King was my launch into this path. I lost my dad when I was 5, and after seeing that movie, I would watch it over and over again. Every day. No exaggeration. I would get home from school and I would want to watch it, and at the time I didn't know why, but later on I realized, just how much of a connection that I found through that story, and Simba losing his dad, and just the oncoming responsibilities as an adult, and identifying with that and being the new man of the house, and it's kind of like that was the first time I really saw myself in animation, and so just through school I was always drawing and all that stuff, and I saw Toy Story when I was about 9 in a theater, and I didn't know what it was or who did it, but I wanted to work with them at some point. And fast forward, I went to college in San Francisco, got my bachelor's there, and then I jumped into games first, and then got an opportunity at Disney, and then worked on a couple films there, Frozen, Big Hero 6, and then I went over to DreamWorks, Boss Baby, or Kung Fu Panda 3, and then Boss Baby, and then came back to the Bay Area to go to Pixar, and spent the last few years there on their last films. But it's great working on the films, but there was always that thing that was still pushing at me, like, to get my own stories out there. So actually, like, around 2014 or so, I started working on Canvas. It was just this, it started off as just like a story to kind of get out, something personal, viewing how my mom dealt with the loss of my dad, and also thinking about my grandfather, and kind of he was always very quiet and a little withdrawn, and wondering about the backstory of that, and my niece, how lively she was, and just bringing out the just kid energy, just bringing bringing out that carefree nature, and I kind of just pulling from those things, because one of the things I realized getting into animation was just the power in pulling from your own experiences, and putting that into the work to be able to connect with people. And so that's what I wanted to do with Canvas, and showing how we deal with loss, and that we don't have to deal with it alone, and just having a piece of hope to put out there, especially during this time, with the quarantine. I mean, I couldn't predict that was going to happen, but with that, and then also the tragedies that happen in our community, like, a lot of times, because of the frequency of it, we have to kind of lock those things away and just kind of move on. And so that's kind of how I handled it with grandfather and Canvas, and locking away these memories of his late wife, and you know, but being able to confront that, you know, with the help of his family. And yeah, so it's you know, the films that I was fortunate enough to be a part of, you know, I think it directly related to my own interest in digging into some of the real stuff and bringing it out in a I guess a unique way. But yeah, it was time to branch off on my own, and you know, so after Canvas, now joining Netflix and directing the feature there. Yeah, just trying to keep it going.
Fantastic. It's really interesting to hear how you kind of created this full circle and sort of reflect back on your childhood of sort of relating to art and animation being something that help you to process grief and find the joy in it. So that's amazing. And there are all kinds of things that I want to talk about in terms of, you know, some of the visual choices that you made in Canvas, and, you know, obviously related to storytelling as well. And a ton of other questions. So that's just an amazing setup, and I'm sure everybody's going to riff off of that too. So let's now go to Elizabeth. Elizabeth, we were fortunate to have you here with the debut of City of Ghosts, which is an incredible show on Netflix. That's I'll let you get into it, but it's an amazing mix of documentary, animation, and live action. For any folks that haven't seen it, I highly recommend you go to it immediately. You, I think, have a really interesting trajectory as well in terms of some of your own personal storytelling with Welcome to My Life. So why don't you just share a little bit about sort of your first starts and kind of finding your storytelling path and exploration.
Yeah, Welcome to My Life really started as just like it was like the last film that I made when I was at Cal Arts, and I think it was like I had actually thought about leaving the school early, but I decided to stay another year because of the like I got a nice scholarship, and also like I didn't actually have a job to go to. I just wanted to get a job because it was really expensive to go to school there. But kind of like during that last year, I think I like figured out that I really felt like I wanted to do this last film, and I came up with this idea based off of being inspired by my brother's writing about himself, and wanting to like reflect this thing about him, but then also knowing that like I really like was starting to get into like improvisational type humor. Like I really like things that kind of like I mean, to be honest, that kind of mess with people. Like they kind of mess with your perception. Like it's like I said something to somebody about liking prank shows, but I really meant like I like shows like Nathan For You, where it's like um, it takes you off guard because it's just a little absurd. So like I think like being driven by that, it's like some of that explains how I ended up on Adventure Time and why I fit in that universe, because I think that's like a lot of like what was appreciated on Adventure Time. Like one of the things was really leaning into the way people really speak, and sometimes that was like, you know, guest stars they would have on the show. We would always want them to sound like what we heard them as when we'd see them in whatever clips we watched. And I think um like knowing the way that you kind of can, I feel bad because I say comedy, but it's not like you're making fun of the person and the way they talk. It's just that you're appreciating it, and there's something nice about that. So I think like, yeah, then it just kept going with like with City of Ghosts. It was just wanting to really lean into like that improvisationalness of life, and like yeah, like showing that and laughing at it.
Yeah, very cool. It's definitely like that attunement to voice, and yeah, like all that that brings to a character or to a person. All right, Miguel, let's hear your story. Casa Grandes is such a like warm and hilarious show, and it's such a nice representation of a lot of Latinx stories of, you know, like it's Spanglish, and sometimes it's more Spanish, sometimes it's more English, sometimes it's more hilarious, sometimes it's more grounded in the emotions, and just wondering about, you know, that storytelling aspect, that comes perhaps from your own experiences, but also like how that worked as an outgrowth of a previous show and all of the you know, extensive experience that you had on so many other episodic series.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for the kind words. I know Nickelodeon has always been their mission, even since I was a kid. These used to always have this little kind of commercial where it says like, "Hey, kids first. This is a kids first studio." And I've always been a Nick kid because you know, that's probably the only channel we could watch when we bootlegged the cable from our neighbors. And it was always something that stood out to me. That I was like, "Hey, this is a studio for me. I could pitch a show. I could be part of this show." And you know, when we approached when I was working on the Loud House, you know, working on the shows, like I started noticing people started listening to me every time I would pitch something or suggest something or bring up another solution or rewrite a section in the board or a script that I was pitching. And you know, I was like, all right, I'll just keep doing that until they tell me to stop, and they never did. But it was a very unique experience because we had to create a whole new world. You know, it's still living in the same universe, but they just moved to the next city, the Casa Grandes, and we already had this awesome little character, Ronnie Ann, which for me, I wanted to do a character that my daughter could look up to, and my daughter could see, because it's all about the power of reflection, right? So like I really didn't have that growing up, but it would be awesome for her to kind of see that and normalize that and throw that out there. Like, hey, that looks like me. That looks like my, you know, my uncle or my neighbor or my abuela, my grandfather. And so because of that, it kind of stemmed from just knowing who she was. And then you just ask yourself who the grandparents are, who are the neighbors, who the friends are going to be. So a lot of that came from, you know, from my family. And then also with the writers, we all sat down and kind of just all through little nuggets of what this world was going to be, just to make it just a sense of like what the real world will look like, especially in every major city. This is what our show wanted to be, exactly like what you would see when you visit all these major cities. It's a rainbow of diversity, and you know, it's something that I when I worked in animation, it was always like, oh man, it's always peppered in the background of like characters of like, oh, there's a brown person, there's another brown person in this. It's like, no, what if we just bring them forward? And how do we do that? How can we do that without making it, without alienating anyone, and just make that universal? So authenticity is very important, and also, you know, animation is a very collaborative, it's key in this industry, even Hollywood, anywhere. And it helps everyone out because we're having so much fun telling these stories, using our voices, using our vision. And I think it shows because of that. I feel like kids are going to be growing up watching everyone's our show, you know, all the shorts, City of Ghost, everything that Frank's working on, and they're going to be like, we could do that. And that's one thing that I've always wanted to do, to like, hey, there is work in this industry. You know, I grew up 12 miles away from Hollywood. I had no idea I could get a job. And, you know, I'm sure, Elizabeth, you feel the same way, Frank and Halima, like we're so close. And it's always fun when you find out and you hire someone on the crew and like, oh, you're local. Cool. All right. I thought we didn't exist. But you know, animation is full of people from all over the world. So it's awesome too. You know, it's, I think I'm going off tangent here. I do that, and I'm sorry, but just
No, totally. I mean, that's such an important part of it all, right? You know,
yeah.
is that you know, just being transparent, especially to folks that are coming up, that like, you know, the behind the curtain was our previous panel. You know, like how do you figure this out? You know, and especially like. You can be that close. Folks in New York, you know, where there's certainly some industry here, but a little bit further removed, and especially for, you know, folks who are underrepresented communities, that's the key part, I think, of your story is like I definitely want to circle back to all of you about, you kind of had these artistic aha moments, but then there's the part where it's like, how can I actually do this? And how do you begin to figure that out? So thank you for raising that. Yeah, absolutely. And I think also the whole point of, you're saying, wanting to see ourselves reflected, like the windows and mirrors concept of, like seeing folks that look like you, understanding experiences that, provide a vista that's not similar to yours, but, like we need a lot more mirrors for sure. So thank you for bringing that up. And then it's kind of a perfect segue to you, Halima, in terms of, that, seeing that it's possible. And I think that you're also really interesting in terms of you're starting out with some personal storytelling and live action and moving into the animation realm. So maybe you can tell us a little bit both about your own beginnings in storytelling and making that move.
Yeah, definitely. So I grew up in Stockton, California, as y'all know. And growing up, I come from a really big family. I'm actually second oldest of 9 siblings, and the youngest is just turned 6. So I feel like I'm really in touch with my kid self, but also being around kids has been a large part of my life. Like I was an unpaid babysitter for most of my life, I think. And so like part of growing up, I was always creative. I liked, writing poems and doodling and things like that. But I think I never really saw creativity as something I could actually do professionally. And so when I was in undergrad, someone gave me the login to their password of Netflix. And at this time, I was studying sociology, and I was on track to get a PhD in sociology because I was really interested in gender studies and race and being a part of that academic world. And so one summer, someone gave me the login to their Netflix, and I was binging everything like international films or foreign films, indie rom-coms, like tons of stuff. And I was watching one particular series called The Tutors. And long story short, there was a character who was terrible, like he was super evil. And I was like, yeah, it's about time for him to get killed off. But in the course of one episode, they went into his backstory. And I was like, oh my goodness, now I really don't want this person to die. Like I learned all about them. And I was like, no, no, no. And of course they got killed off and I was sad. But in that moment, I was just so shocked because it was like in the span of 40 minutes, this show completely changed the way I thought about this one person. And I thought, well, if this medium can change the way I think about one person, then it has to have the capacity to change the way people think about maybe me and my family and my community and the parts of me that I feel are really misunderstood. And so I felt like that was the moment, what I would say like purpose and passion kind of met. And I went downstairs and told my mom, like, I want to be a filmmaker. I want to be in this space. And so from there, I took as many, writing and film classes as I could. I applied to grad school and moved to LA when I got into USC School of Cinematic Arts. And there is where I made Amelia's Closet as my thesis film. And that was a journey in and of itself because that was a film that really started out as a Christmas story, actually. And while I was in LA, and so I decided, well, I was kind of at a roadblock because I was like, I feel like there's something deeper that could be told with this story. So I went back to my hometown and I went to my elementary school because it was about a little girl and her experience with Christmas. And I thought it would be nostalgic and kind of, really open up the creativity. But when I went to the school, I immediately felt incredibly sick and I felt nauseous, and all the real feelings and memories of what it was kind of like in that space came back to me. And it was that experience of being bullied, the experiences of some of the ways that some of the educators treated me. And so and not just me, but a lot of the children of color that were at that school. And so to me, that visceral reaction kind of screamed that there's a deeper truth that needed to be told with this story. And that's where I went home and I penned Amelia's Closet. And that was a story that I told. And it was definitely a labor of love and it was tough to make, but I've always made a habit of telling personal stories, but I felt like this one was one that was really, really about, very specific to my identity and my experience. And it was great putting it out there and getting to engage people in conversations about that. And so, after Amelia's Closet, and did really well and got licensed and all that amazing stuff, and I got to meet you and be a part of the festival. It took a while to kind of find my way in the industry. I couldn't find a job after grad school to save my life. Like I worked at Joann Fabrics. That's the only job I could find. But after a while, I got into a couple of fellowships. I did Break the Room with Samir Gardezi, and then I did the Nickelodeon Writers Program, which I actually got to shadow Casagrandes a little bit while I was there, which was a really dope experience.
Oh, no way. Did you know that, Miguel?
I was probably locked away in a room.
I love these connections.
Yeah, it wasn't a super long stint, but yeah, I got to be in the writer's room. And from there, the program was amazing. And from there, I ended up, I got a freelance opportunity there, and I got staffed at Disney, and I sold the show to a Nickelodeon live action. Like all that happened like in a span of like a week, which was awesome. So yeah, I mean, but the cool thing is that I feel like a lot of these opportunities, and this is something that I bring with me, is just bringing, being willing to tell, my own story and looking for those kinds of opportunities, because I think that that's what, I don't know, that's part of my why, right? Is like amplifying my own voice, also getting the opportunity to amplify the communities that it represents. So yeah, it's been a journey, and it's still only the beginning. So I'm excited.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And absolutely, yeah, I think the kind of storytelling that you all are modeling, that has a resonance, and sort of goes back to, what Frank, what you were saying about, beginning to unpack how you were relating to animation, even if it wasn't a direct reflection of the experience that you were going through, but, tapping into that. And then just the stories that we share, just as we're talking, like, I always appreciate that you share your personal story, Halima, like 9 kids. Hey, I'm number 9 too. So like, just bring you to the table that like the standard, 2.2 kids tending not to be of color that are represented on popular storytelling are not a lot of our lived experiences. So, just us having another way to just, feel free talking about things and integrating them is amazing. But also it's a beautiful way of like leading back into my next question for you all, which I think a lot of our audience is really interested in, especially folks that are trying to figure out, what is their first step kind of in this, is to just talk about storytelling a little bit and what it means to you as visual artists, as animators, as people that, like Elizabeth, you're thinking about sound and voice, you all are thinking about all these different things, but maybe if you all can just ground us a little bit in, like what are the different elements that you sort of structure to make a story, which is obviously far above and beyond writing in this case. So Frank, maybe you can start off and tell us a little bit about some of the integration of different animation that you made in Canvas, the different styles that you've worked in, and just sort of what you were considering in telling that story.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like, storytelling, the passing down of stories is such an ancient tradition, in different ways, whether, you have hieroglyphics or, cave painting, like all cave art, and, just it's such a unique vehicle, I think, for, just educating people in different ways, whether it's, through an experience or just communicating your experience in in a way that hopefully helps someone to not feel alone out there having the same experience somewhere else. And so with Canvas, that was kind of what I wanted to do with that in my experience with loss, even indirectly, through watching how my mom experienced it, and just communicating that visually in that particular project. There are different things, like there's a 2D aspect and a 3D aspect to the short, in which like I try to make sure that everything I'm doing has a reason behind it, and just on the 2D aspect, there was like just that feeling of wanting to pay respect to 2D animation, and that was the thing that got me interested in animation. There's a magic that you feel, seeing a drawing come to life, and just that kind of direct link to your soul in a way, coming right out of your hand. It's something really magical about it, and in those moments, with Grandpa, having these moments with his late wife, or even the beginning, which was a memory. There's something magical about that. There's the idea of memories, that we store these images in our heads, and we can recall them at any moment. I'm gonna get too like it's cool. I don't know. I don't know how else to put
You can
it,
go there, go deep.
but
You're doing
it's
an amazing job.
But that was something that I wanted to communicate in 2D because of that reason. It's just the magical aspect of it, and then grounding the reality in CG and in a style that was a little more natural, and even communicating the grandfather's emotional state, through lighting, how in the interior of the house, which is where he spends most of his time, everything being very dark, and the colors are more desaturated, and it's kind of like an empty feeling, like how he feels navigating every day. But then, the moment he goes outside, the brightness when his granddaughter arrives, and the music changes, it gets a little, more upbeat, and there's like, just the vibrancy that she brings to his life. These are all things that I think about in how we interact in the world around us. But just to get that into a story, I just trying to be very mindful of just whatever I can communicate in whatever kind of subtle ways to still support this core idea of the story I wanted to tell. Like I was, I was gonna do that, and also shout out to Pearl Lil. I think I saw her in the chat. One of our story artists on Canvas. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't even know if I answered the question. I kind of.
Oh, you totally did, and inspired like way more, I'm sure, for everybody to think about. Like I love what you're saying about that idea of hand-drawn animation, and that kind of spirit that comes from it, because I feel like it's a very tactile film. There are all these wonderful scenes of just like physical affection between a child and a grandfather, between the couples, and there's a quality that you managed to capture, like through the CG, and then on through some of the 2D that also then captures the art. So definitely, your storytelling seems to really grab these materials and be able to like convey something that we feel, that is tactile. So
yeah,
really
and there's the representation aspect of the stories we tell as well, which is like whatever ways we can bring that bit of truth to the experience. Like I mentioned with the locking away of the paintings reflecting kind of how we have to deal with some of the things that go on in the world, but also just visually how we're represented. I feel like a lot of times Black characters, we don't get that full depth of exploration in the characters, and whether it gets, whether it's skin, how our skin is treated, or how Hair is reflected. You know, it's not just, you can't just make some hair curly and all of a sudden, you know, oh, that's it. That's, you know, like it's, and we didn't have a lot of money to work with in that exploration, but we did what we could to make sure that we did as close as we could to, you know, just something we were happy with. Um, and it showed in the response, you know, on you know, social media and stuff, you know, how people responded, seeing, you know, the mom's hair, or, you know, grandfather, or even just wearing her natural or something. You know, it's all these little things that we put into the stories that, you know, someone can get something out of it. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to throw it to Elizabeth, but before we do, I just want to encourage folks, you can drop your questions in the Q&A function so that we can pick them up in a little while and pose them directly. So go ahead and use that if you all have burning questions, which I'm sure you do for folks. So Elizabeth, let's talk about, you know, your amazing integration of live action and animation and voice and all these like wild, as you said, like I forgot how you put it. You're going to have to restate it, but it was a brilliant idea of like, you know, kind of throwing people off to make them really focus on the storytelling.
Yeah, I've been thinking about how to describe it a lot lately, because like I was thinking like, I mean, honestly, sometimes I am trying to figure out how to simplify, how to explain how I did it, or like what, how do you organize a show that's like that, that's like doesn't exist as a as a format for animated writing or shows. um and I think like all of it is like really the clearest when I think about that. Like I made sure that there was like a really specific point of view for where the show came from. Like so like the framing of it is that there's a this little girl who has a ghost club, has a an older brother who's making a documentary about her, because she's so exciting. So I think looking at it through that lens, like going like, first of all, it's kids making a documentary, so we have to make it believably like this is kids making a documentary about this thing that they love. So that's already like a point of view that kind of eliminates certain things that you might do in another type of show. Like it wouldn't be staged the way any other show would be staged, because you're trying to make it all about that particular way of seeing it. And I think like just like as an overarching thing, that sort of guided like a lot of um just a lot of those choices, like a lot of the choices of like who do you show, like whose point of view are we honoring, like with each episode, like who's the important story about, and like who's the person who's like trying to learn something or trying to find something. Like in some cases it wasn't like the main character is like learning a lesson, so I think it was really just trying to like honor that for each instance. And like in general for like if we're talking about, you know, um, storytelling from different perspectives, especially ones that haven't been looked at, I think it's like that's why it's so important for people to be able to have a vehicle to tell their own stories, because everybody's going to have that unique point of view, and we definitely need more of that, so that there's just like a greater understanding of like how everybody experiences the world is affected by like who they are, and like yeah. So
Yeah, totally. All right, Miguel, contact on this is like it's so lively, and there's such a like vibrancy in terms of like colors and characters, and there's a lot going on in this great way. And I just wonder, like, what would your trajectory like, sort of starting off early in your career as a storyboard artist and going on to kind of decide the choices that you would make to craft this kind of vibe and storytelling?
Yeah, you know, as a being a board artist, you kind of jump around from different show styles, and something people don't realize is there's different ways of boarding, right? There's different genres of boarding. There's like comedy, there's action, and it's good to kind of be well rounded with all that, especially jumping into any board or any script, because sometimes you see a script and the screen direction is like that thick and it's gonna take you like a whole day just to do that section. So approaching things like that was always one of my things where I kind of felt like I felt like I always got the hardest episodes, but I kept asking my producers, like, why do you keep giving me all this hard stuff? I want to sleep at night. I was like, well, you're the only one that could do it. I thought that was just an excuse they threw at me, but I learned quickly I had to work hard, because for me, what opened my eyes was there weren't that many, you know, people of color in the board field, especially most of the studios I worked at. And sometimes I was the only Latino on the crew. And it's crazy just to think that we're in the you know two what do you call it, 2000s. Yeah, 2010s. And just being the only Latino on the show, like I feel like this is a lot for a lot of people, like BIPOC people. They have to work harder, twice as hard, to show that we could do the work. And that's how I always approach things. And when it came to boarding and where I'm at right now, because of my experience as a board artist, you're really able to relate to different aspects of the pipeline. Because one thing for me as a board artist, for being uh, uh, on different shows, I always wonder why all the artists hated me, because I just went crazy on one board and I just added so many scenes and so many poses. But now that I'm directing, I realize that, oh man, they must have hated me, because I probably gave them like 60 designs to do that week. But now that I know how to approach things when it comes to artists and designs and boards, I now look at scripts as a co-EP or as a director, seeing both as a story and visual level, that I'm able to help out the board artists, especially like preserving pencil mileage, because we all know, I think we all have that experience of running. Here's a good thing: whenever your hand hurts from drawing a lot and you're white knuckling the pen, run it with really hot water. And that's, I hope you don't get to that point, but as a board artist, you're sometimes trying to approach different things of like, how do I figure out, how do I meet this deadline? There's so much going on. Like, I don't want to do any more all-nighters. But that's one thing I help my team to figure out, like, how do we find these solutions? And I take that from other shows I worked on. Like, hey, we had this way of approaching deadlines, or we have a check-in every Thursday, or a check-in Thursday, a check-in on Tuesday. Just trying to figure out different ways to help out the board team. And also, approaching things of like shorthand for cuts that we need to do is in order to have a great pitch in the writer's room. And obviously you don't want to spend a whole day or a week boarding this section and then realize this is the first thing we got to cut. So I try to approach things beforehand, so we kick it off to the board artist. So I'm always reading things when it comes as a board artist, like, how would I board this? But I'm not gonna force that onto my board team. It's like, hey, this is how I would do it. I can't wait to see what they're gonna do, because that's one thing that always excites me. Am I answering the question? I don't know.
You're providing a lot of information.
Okay, cool.
That's awesome. I mean, I think that also, like, the way that you're integrating, really talking about developing your story, but also like management. I'm sure, like, feel free to turn on your mics all as well. But I'm sure so many people struggle, when you don't have good management, when you don't have somebody that's really supporting you, both in terms of what you're describing sounds like just being a leader in the best possible way of, like, making suggestions but not driving them, but also having like those really practical solutions. Like, I'm definitely going to pass that hand tip on to somebody that I know that's spending way too much time drawing lately. But like that whole mix of you're able to facilitate ideas and growth in your team, bring practical knowledge to the table, and keep that inspiration going is all huge.
Yeah, and we have all the communication open for people to pitch ideas to us. Like, how would we handle this? How would we do this? We recently got a storyboard floater to help out with the board team in case they want to take some vacation off. And it helps out because, you know, especially working from home, it's really hard trying to gauge time. Like I thought we were still in March, and you know, it's we need that break. We need that time away from, you know, I miss driving in traffic because that's where I got to download and just like forget about stuff.
Yeah.
And now it's like, you know, I just walk over to the other room. I was like, oh, workers over there. Like, I want to go back in there tomorrow. But no, it's all
Yeah,
good.
everybody feel free to chime in and just like
That's right. There's also that comfort of being home too. So it's like, you know, sometimes you're, you know, if you, I work remote at an early job, and it was kind of one of those things where, you know, if family is there or whoever is there, it's kind of like, oh, you're here, so you can do this. Then I'm like, no, I'm working. So, you know, but yeah, it's hard to.
you got some extra chores, Frank.
Switch brains sometimes. Yeah, I mean, I got 2 little ones too, so
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you heard the screaming earlier, but
Yeah, we can relate.
so you kind of, yeah, you
Yeah,
have
definitely.
both brains on at the same time instead of, you know, being somewhere else to kind of separate that.
Yep. Yeah. And Halima, can you tell us just a little bit briefly? I want to make sure we get to folks' questions, but could you share a little bit about making your move from live action to storytelling to back and forth? You know, like how does that shift how you conceive of things?
Sorry, my button was like jammed. I was like hitting it unmute.
Happens to me all the time.
But yeah, I mean, my shift, to me, it has never been a weird shift. I've always had equal appreciation for animation as I've had live action, just for their respective opportunities. And I mean, I kind of fell into the trap of, oh, I can't draw and I'm not an artist, so I can't do this. But I quickly found that, especially in television, depending on the show, that it doesn't matter if you necessarily have that background, you can still write. And so for me, the writing for animation and live action, I approach it the same way. You know, I approach it like in animation, yes, there are a lot of things that you can explore and do and play with that you can in live action. But I think, as Miguel just pointed out, like there's still limitations to what you can do. Any producer will tell you right now that no, you can't just write whatever you want to write in 10 different backgrounds and not reuse anything. There are definitely still like limitations, but they look a little bit differently for each one. But I feel like the thing that I bring into both spaces, no matter what, is, you know, I write 2 things. One, I write what I know. So, you know, I write and I pull from my personal experience, from whether it's from my experience as a, you know, a young woman, a woman of color, a Black woman. I write specifically from experiences and memories that I have. And the other thing is I write what the character knows, which I think is important for folks who, for example, like if I'm writing for a character who comes from a different identity, whether it be ethnic, racial, gender identity, it's important to be mindful of what that character knows and what is the truth of their experience, because I don't want to wrongfully project my experience onto someone who wouldn't have that, you know. And I think it opens up the opportunity to be as a creative, an ally in this space, you know, as a creative, to point out the things that I may not necessarily know, and be brave enough to explore and learn about the things that I don't, so that I can be true to whatever that identity is, or invite the right people in to inform that perspective. So and that's true whether you're writing about a sponge under the sea or something that's grounded or not. You know, I think that's really important. So regardless of whether I'm in live action or animation, I approach it the same. And I feel like what's really been the difference between the two is writing for what audience, because Amelia's Closet is you know, a 11-year-old girl, but the tone of it is for a different audience than, let's say, the audience for Disney or an audience for Nickelodeon, or I've developed with preschool, right? So the voice of that really and how you navigate for your audience varies. But whether it's animated or not, for me, hasn't made a difference. I think for the folks out there, if you are hesitant like myself, where I was, whether you can write for one space or another, I would definitely say totally do it if you want to. If you're capable of doing it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I also appreciate what you said about, voice and writing for an audience. And it's interesting for us, being on the programming and curating side, to kind of push that envelope. Like Amelia's Closet is a serious story, and it's tonally a bit higher certainly than the experience of the girl's age range, but it's also like about context. So that's what I love, similarly to a degree with your story, Frank. Like there's serious subject matter and tone, but like you can also create a context. So I love this idea of being able to freely exchange with all of you, the kind of collaboration that you and I had, Halima, and with you, Elizabeth, about getting our young people to expand their understanding, having dialogues around that work. It's kind of like in a classroom, we know a lot of you parents can relate to this. The teacher will say like, well, a kid's ideal book is actually the level just beyond, it's the reach, so that it's okay. And I know you can speak to this really beautifully, Elizabeth. It's okay if a kid doesn't understand everything that's going on, because that inspires a kind of curiosity.
Yeah, kids just they learn faster than you expect them to, like almost all the time. Like, I mean, I feel like I saw it with my own kid, and I just, like, from what I've gathered and the kids that I see in his class or at his school, it feels like, yeah, they're perceptive. So like, and it's fun for everybody if you don't sell them short when it comes to that. Like, it's fun for me to see it. It's fun for me to see kids light up like that. I don't know how to explain it other than, like, when you see it, it's totally the best thing. And like, to make them feel like they're stretching themselves, they get really stoked about that. So like, as many opportunities when we're presenting them with a story, for them to get excited by it, to like want to explore that on their own, like, that's the best.
Yeah. That's fantastic. All right, I do want to get to questions from the audience, but I just want to also segue from what you beautifully set up, Halima, about allyship and making access. I think all of you, I know some of you have specific initiatives, Frank, but really thinking about how are we good allies? How do we make space? How do we foster the next generation? How do we make just more space from everyone, from all kinds of backgrounds and abilities in this space? So I just wonder if any of you all want to just briefly touch upon how you go about approaching that, and maybe start with you, Frank, since Rise Up is directly advocating for this.
Yeah, I mean that all came about me, just the idea of bridging that gap. I think Miguel talked about it a little bit about just you could be right there, and you can also be on the other side of the world, and it can, no matter where you are, it could still seem so far away to be in the filmmaking world, or in quote unquote Hollywood. It's and a lot of times it's we wonder. I know we dealt with this at previous studios I was at, where we're kind of wondering why there's a low number of Black people in the animation room, or why am I the only Black animator, or one of two in all these studios, and and sometimes it comes down to just access, just not having the access. And I mean, you gotta pursue animation. It's not cheap at all. And I mean, I'm still paying on student loans, so it's not the most accessible outlet, creative outlet, and so just trying to bridge that gap, trying to get people paired up with mentors, some people to even I think someone was asking in the chat about just like it related to exposure, and a lot of times there's such great talent there, and you just don't know that they're there. And I think the power of social media now is helped a lot with that. That I think one of the things we can keep doing is just this if you're on social media or something, like just making yourself available to answer those questions or answer those emails or whatever you can speak to your journey, putting that out there to help people, and just always keeping that struggle in mind. Like animation was not easy for me. I was there's many times in the beginning where I questioned if that was the right thing I'm supposed to be doing, because so and so is getting it a lot easier than I am, or they're and I'm something's just not clicking, and but putting those stories out there so people, like I was saying earlier about like not feeling alone, because you may give up on a dream when you're like right at the cusp of like that breakthrough, and yeah, just being vulnerable in your experience, speaking to that, and just making yourself available as much as you can, to help people get to where you've been able to reach.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's Rise Up information in the contact sheet for sure, and also Halima mentioned the Nickelodeon Writers Workshop, which is another nice connection between you and Miguel and their support. Do you want to just briefly touch upon your experience getting connected with that and how folks can get connected?
Yeah, the Nick writing program, I mean, it's for anyone who's interested in writing comedy, whether regardless of the audience or age range, that program is amazing. It's a comprehensive look at what it means to write for a comedy, a television comedy. So I learned a ton, and I got to peek in to a lot of the different resources that Nickelodeon as a studio had, and it was at a really cool time where Casa Grandes was there, and a lot of really cool. I mean, Nick is always making really great content, but I think it was specifically at a time where conversations about how do we make more inclusive and projects that reflect a diverse community was being had. So it was a really cool time to be there too. So yeah, I think anyone who's looking to, grow and learn what it's like to not just in the craft, but know how to navigate and network and build connections. It's a really great program, one of many really great programs. And I believe that I can't remember, I know they moved the application date, but definitely connect with the program. They're on, I think, almost all platforms from Twitter, Facebook, and of course their website. And they also have an artist program too. So that's another thing that you can take advantage of as well. So definitely check that out and apply, because I definitely would not be where I am in my career and the kind of writer that I am without that program.
Fantastic. All right, I'm gonna get to your questions, and I'm gonna start with a question actually from last week's panel, because we didn't have a lot of time there, and we had some really great questions. And this is just kind of an interesting take that I think is also important to talk about. It's so important to uphold these BIPOC stories, but there's also the flip side where people might make assumptions about the kind of stories that you want to tell and perhaps be limiting. So this is from someone who wrote in last time that said, how can a BIPOC writer avoid being pigeonholed into writing the race episode? I've had a couple of coffees where I've been told to play up my culture on my resume interviews. Is it the responsibility of BIPOC writers to write about themselves when other writers can write what they please? So I'd love to, throw it to whoever feels like they can speak to that right now.
I could go first. That I'm gonna approach it as an artist as well too, because I've been pigeonholed for certain things as well. But I think we're in this part of the new frontier of inclusivity now, and there's bound to be awkwardness, and that's okay because people are learning. They're gonna trip over themselves, but for me, the best thing is like at least they know they're going to learn, they're going to grow, and that's what's going to make this industry a lot better. You know, it's not happening right now, but it's going to take a few. I wish it could be tomorrow and it'd be better, but it's going to take a few more years to get there. But one thing I could say about this is set your boundaries and know what you have to represent. You don't have to represent anything beyond your own personal experience. Um, there are so many facets to every person, and you're allowed to decide what you want to write about, and it's your own story, it's your own voice, and you can't be I wish you could control being pigeonholed, but sometimes anyone, that's how people will perceive you. And you know, that being said, you know, I only got to direct on a Mexican show, or I couldn't direct on this other show, but I'm taking that as like, all right, I'm looking at my 10-year experience as a board artist, and you know, maybe you have, you know, 2-3 years of writing. Just take that into and let that drive you and do the best job you can. And then, you know, maybe in the future they're going to see, wow, this guy could direct the next movie. This guy could direct or run this show. But you got to be true to yourself and let that authenticity shine. That's all I got.
All right.
Oh,
Go ahead, sorry.
Oh no, go ahead, Helena.
Oh, yeah, I was gonna add, you know, because that's something that I feel I've experienced as well. And what I found is I feel like people hear about, higher ups hear about these issues, and creatives hear about these issues happening in the world. And sometimes what they know is that they need to have you in the room, but they don't know why they need to have you in the room. So, you know, they don't necessarily know how to utilize or incorporate, you know, who you are. And so sometimes the assumption is, you know, that we need this specific person because we need them to tell this story without necessarily asking if that's the conversation that that person wants to engage, because not everyone who comes from that identity wants to be that spokesperson, wants to be that poster child, wants to be having to spearhead those conversations, you know. And so I think there's work to be done, and that work is actively being done, and knowing how to create a space, and how to engage those conversations, engage what people are comfortable with. But yeah, it is important to, you know, for folks to also know that just because you come from a specific identity, that you're only limited to writing to that experience. And I 100% agree with being able to communicate those boundaries if it's something that you don't feel comfortable with. And in tandem with that, I'm a big believer in, you know, what is this, what are you producing and what are you writing? Are you, you know, being able to, you know, share samples with people that make that loud and clear, that you, for the stuff that you specifically want to write, you know, whether it's a genre or a specific audience, that if there's something specific that you want to write, being able to show that and put that in front of people is one of the loudest ways you can make that clear about what it is you want, what it is you want to do.
Yeah, that sounds great in terms of approach. And I know that our audience often is like, how do you break that down, Helena? How do you actually get, you know, you're writing a great, you know, spec, or what? How do you actually get somebody to pay attention to that?
Like, how do you get your work in front of?
Yeah, if you're writing in a vein that maybe is outside of the box that folks on a team have put you in, how do you actually get them to pay attention to a different kind of approach?
Well, I think it depends on who you're speaking to, right? Because I mean, let's say like if if you're staffed on a show and you're staffed on a particular show, you know, that's probably, as far as genre and things like that, like they're hiring for you to write to that particular genre. When it comes to, but again, when it comes to, you know, specifically like, oh, we want to have a episode about race or gender or something like that, I think it's about communicating those boundaries. If this conversation is between you and, let's say, like your representative, your agent, or your manager, and all the stuff you keep getting is stuff that you don't want to write on, then that is a larger conversation between you and your rep about, you know, again, what's the stuff that you want to write, and making sure that you're building your team with folks who know exactly what you want to do, so they know how to shop you around, because your rep is the person who's telling the rest of the world, the rest of the industry, this is what this person wants to do, this is their specialty. So I think that's an important conversation to have. And then lastly, I think just putting yourself in spaces and engaging conversations. Like for me, when the world wasn't shut down, I was big on going to film festivals, as you know. And so it was great being able to connect with people and share them samples of my work and my scripts that made it clear the kinds of stuff that I wanted to do, or the different kinds of things that I wanted to do. So I think those are all different ways to be able to communicate to different people the vision that you have for your own specific voice, if that makes sense.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's really helpful to break it down for folks. I appreciate that. Elizabeth, I think I have one for you, because I know that you created a super diverse, really collaborative and unique team on City of Ghosts. So this is the question for you. Now I have to find it, sorry. As a BIPOC, I feel like these conversations are only being held inside of our communities. What's one action you've taken to get allies and allies like you to be vocal and actively support BIPOC voices outside and inside the studio?
I mean, without like being like specific in ways that I can't be specific, I think it's like trying to know that like I'm at a certain position where like I have access to people that are at levels of the studio where I can talk to them about it. Like basically just say like, hey, like there are these issues that are being talked about. Can I talk to you about it? What are some like initiatives that we could talk about? Just like, even if it's just talking at first, and start doing this stuff. So I think it's been very much just trying to like I guess it's like using my power to like leverage power. If that makes sense, you know? Like I know that I have that access, so it's a little bit on me to converse about that. There was just one small thing I wanted to say about that question from earlier, which is just that like to me, like I recognize like this certain frustration that I really understand behind that question, like the question of like, do I always have to represent Asian people for myself? Like, do I always have to like be like the expert in the room to talk about that because I'm Asian? Like, do I have to accept that as like when other people like I mean, if we're gonna be honest, like if you know, white guy wanted to write a project about being Asian, he'd probably like be allowed to write it. So like it is kind of like, why do they get to do, you know, whatever they want, and I kind of have to do this specific thing so that it's authentic? You shouldn't. Like at the end of the day, you shouldn't have to do that. Nobody should be pigeonholed that way. You should be able to write whatever you want. I wish I could write like a sci-fi show, or like, you know, Game of Thrones or something like that, and have full license to do everything about everything. But like for me right now, it's just been kind of like baby steps into like permission to just create in general. So yeah, anyway, I just wanted to tell them like I agree with that frustration that's behind it. We shouldn't sort of have to just always represent our strife. We should be able to have fantasies about, I don't know, like yeah, being in Victorian eras and things like that.
Yep, in space and in Victorian gear. Yep, for sure. Maybe Frank and Miguel, you want to amplify some of that a bit, since you're both in the like EVP realm as well, and producing other works. How do you sort of see this, you know, getting this ethos out there.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like if you're just to kind of directly piggyback a little bit with that, just like it's like if you're gonna be whatever story you're telling, just coming from a truthful place, period. And if it's not the place that you're coming from personally, get the people that you need and put them in place. Like it's it's one of the things that you can tell when it's not there. You see a project and you can tell when someone's trying to just faking it basically. And that was one of the cool experiences on Soul. That was the last film I was on at Pixar, and because it was, I was on pretty early. I think when I joined the Cultural Fest, I was like maybe, I think I was maybe finishing up on Incredibles 2 at the time, and it was one of those things where I was actually surprised that this group was being put together, and it wasn't just people in production. It was like, yeah. My guy Rod, that I was in security, and then we have people from the like everywhere in the studio, because the whole idea of it was we want to make sure that we're being as truthful as possible. We're telling a story that I don't feel comfortable telling, and I need you to let me know what I don't know. That was the kind of the situation, and I was kind of like, oh, okay, that's the, that was nice to not just jump into a film that's being told that's representing something that I connect with, but not being asked about it, or they're just assumptions being made about it, and and I think as creators, we need to do the same thing. I think we do have permission to tell whatever story you want to tell, but just being respectful of the subject matter, and putting those people that can bring that truthful perspective to it. It's our job to tell the truth. Period. That's
Yep. And to tell your truth, that they can be truths.
Yeah.
Miguel?
I just have one little thing I wanted to say. It's good to have higher ups to have your back. I want to give a shout out to Ramsey Natal, who is there to make sure everyone is. Frank, I'm sure you worked with Ramsey too, and she's amazing. She helps us kind of approach these new frontiers, especially at Nickelodeon. Things are changing for the better. It's going to take some time, but at least we're making the right steps forward. And also, one thing for me, for us on Casa, is that I when we first hired these all these writers, I wanted to be inclusive as we could with writers and the staff and the crew and the everyone involved. And that was one of my main points. Was this was 5 years ago. I brought up I wanted to hire a diverse crew, and the first thing I was told, and it's no fault to them, it's just that they don't have these blind spots, is we just can't find them, or they're not out there, or they're too green, they're not starting off. The next day I brought a list of 300 names.
Not the right fit.
Yeah, they're not the right fit. The next day I brought 300 names. We hired 36 of them. And just being aggressive, sometimes you kind of have to be like, hey, this is what we got to do. And I always have this post-it note in front of my my computer that it is a quote from Kenya Barris, who created Blackish. And it's always, I think it's backwards, but well, culturally speaking, that's how I always start my conversation. And things start happening slowly, but they happen. Again, I don't know if I answered your question.
That's the beauty of it. You get to answer the question that you hear and you shape, which is what we're talking about is like dialogue and exchange, and things like spark other ideas. So we have to wrap up. and it pains me because you all have so many great questions. There's so many great comments in the chat. Thank you all. I think I just want to close with one quick question, just to round it up, because we really, we have a very expansive view at NYICFF of what media for kids and young folks can be, and of what the next generation is. But just thinking about, if you all can leave us, maybe each of you, just like with one last truth or sentiment about what making work for the next generation means to you. So let's just go in alpha order, and we have you, Frank. Putting you on the spot.
It's like
But also like bringing your whole selves. Okay, I'm really sorry about the grade school aspect, because we don't know what teachers do. But thinking about you and your kids, and existing in this world of creating this work, but also seeing what being a creator, what you're modeling for your own kids is showing, what these stories are, how these stories are operating. What's your big takeaway maybe for folks that are exploring that, or what's most meaningful to you?
I think what's most meaningful is just the idea of doing it. Just the fact that you're able to do it and not accept no. Like you're gonna get no's. We all get no's, and it's like, well, not letting that shut you down, and just keep going, navigate around it, get to that eventual yes, or say yes to yourself, and find a way to make it happen. And that's the core thing, like telling your story, period. Like we all have a unique perspective that matters, and if you have a story to tell, if you have an idea of what you want to do, if you know where you want to be, or you don't know, and you just need to find the right people to get you closer to finding that out, like find a way to make it happen in some way. Use any and all resources that you have at your disposal. I mean, the internet has made a lot of things more accessible now. There's plenty of connections made through social media that I wouldn't have made if I just didn't put myself out on that ledge and ask. Even if they didn't respond, I find a window, ask. I see someone's active, and maybe there's a window, they may see this, get in there and try to make it happen in some way. And that's the main thing, is just find a way.
Very cool. All right, Elizabeth, you said some great things about thinking about making work for your own kids, which expands out. Maybe you could share that if you want.
Yeah, I mean, I think like it's making work to make kids feel cared about and loved, like, which for me is like having people say they felt seen by my show, like in the little that we did. Like it's always been really touching to have the reaction of like a kid saying, or maybe even like they're a grown-up child saying, like, I heard, like, I'm specifically thinking about the one where we had the Zapotec language. Like I heard somebody just say they heard it on TV, and then they immediately told their dad to watch it just because they'd never seen a show that had that in it and that excitement. And I think that feeling of being, like represented and loved, like that's been a joy to bring to people. The other part, like as far as just like being able to do it, like being able to tell your story and having the permission to do it, I want kids to feel like it's not hard. Like I want to give them an example of like I did it, not that it wasn't not hard for me, but it should be easier for them because I did it, and if I can do it, like they can do it. And so I think like ultimately I hope that's what they get. They feel like, oh, I just have to like have a plan. If I work it out and I have a plan, then it's possible to tell my story, or to tell the story that I want to tell. So yeah.
Love that. All right, Halima.
Yeah, I echoing everything that Elizabeth just said. And I think there's two things for me. One, writing for this audience and creating for this audience. One, I think it's really exciting to be able to imagine the world that we want to live in and have the opportunity to present that, whatever that looks like, whatever genre, style, tone of the show. And the audience inspires that in me. Not only what do I want my siblings and my nieces and nephews to accept that is normal, like what normal do I want to set the bar for them and in the world, but also the conversations that they're having now, because they're different than the ones that I had. It's an opportunity to engage stuff, forward conversations, and in a way that I think other audiences or other platforms don't allow you to do. So I take that as an honor and an amazing responsibility in the work that I do. And then also I think just there's something really gratifying about being able to create that feeling and spark that feeling for your audience of like, oh my gosh, that excitement about whatever the content is. And I think we're moving to this place of it's not just solely about seeing yourself on TV or seeing yourself reflected on screen, but it's also about seeing yourself as you see yourself on screen, which I think there's a difference between the two. And I'm excited for the kind of work and the kind of dedication that folks in the space are doing to make that happen and to spark that even deeper feeling for kids too. So that's why I love writing in this space and creating in this space.
Yeah, that's really beautifully put. And I was just having a conversation with a colleague where we were like, let's throw the word normal out the window, like replace normal with like to be fully seen, to your point. All right, Miguel, you get to wrap it up.
All right, I'll do this quick, and I'll probably give the wrong answer too. Today's kids.
Miguel, today's about no wrong answers.
Today's kids are the most diverse and inclusive generation ever. So it's good to have characters that reflect the multicultural families in the US and even the world. And also kids today, not kids today, but we all had this childhood wonder in us that, when we were kids, we were inspired, just like Frank, you mentioned Lion King, and that was just a pivotal moment in your life, how that kind of but it helped you make your path and your journey. And we have the power to kind of show this new generation of kids, especially with my daughter who's 7. I get to show her and teach her and show her what I'm working on, and just see her understand what we're trying to say, and just making these shows universal as we can. And jumping off of what Frank said earlier, we are storytellers. We're all everyone in this chat, everyone here, we're all storytellers. We're all filmmakers. Sometimes either our history was suppressed 500 years ago or something, but we get to tell these stories now that some of our parents didn't even know, because we all have everything at our hands, our phones, and I'm sure everyone here is a walking studio that I'm talking to, like Elizabeth, Frank, Halima. You could make your own show, you can make your own movie by yourself, but it's better to be collaborative and have that, because that's going to open up the doors for everyone that's coming behind us, who, as long as they get their foot in the door, at least we'll start like to bring them in or notice them, or I'm really proud of the Casa Grandes, because we are such a diverse crew that a lot of them probably wouldn't even gotten a shot in this industry, but now they're moving. Some of them are moving to better and bigger things, and I'm really happy and proud for them, because now I could hit them up for a job one day. But it's something that I always saw, that it's better to be more inclusive in the studio, and kids know that they are, when something's not authentic, they know, they could tell. And right off the bat, kids want to understand, or they want to feel heard and seen or learn. You always have to approach things of like, I want to do this episode because I want to do it for the kids that want to learn or they don't know this stuff. You know, that's why, you know, City of Ghosts, I was like, oh my God, I lived in Boyle Heights my entire life. I had no idea this was a thing. I knew about, you know, Japanese and everything. But still, like, the more you learn, the more it's better. And I can't wait for City of, or Country of Ghost, the movie, to come out.
Me too, man.
Galaxy of Ghosts. All right, Miguel, that was a beautiful wrap up. Kudos. Thank you all. Frank, Kalima, Elizabeth, Miguel, you all are so inspiring and so generous with sharing all of your knowledge and journeys. And thank you, audience. You all were awesome, and I can't wait to read the full chat and all of your questions. And, you know, keep coming back. And, you know, as everybody here said, you know, like, keep at it. Be collaborative, invite more people in, and, you know, put it out there. And come back next week. We have a great conversation. Same time next week, Beyond Binary and Kids Media, and a couple more after that. So thank you all, everybody. And I hope we get to continue the dialogue. Thank you all so much. Have a great
Thank
day,
you.
evening.
Thank you. Fan of everyone here.
Ciao.
Same. Great to